Beverly Walsh had my car towed while I was buying groceries. I came home to tire marks on my driveway and our HOA president smirking like she'd won the lottery. My restored Camaro was gone, dragged away because it was an eyesore that violated her precious community standards. She threw my Bronze Star license plate frame in the trash and sneered, "Military people think they're special, but this is my neighborhood now." 22 years serving this country, and she treats me like garbage over a perfectly legal car parked on my own property. Beverly just made the biggest mistake of her life, because what's sitting in my garage weighs 25 tons, and she's about to lose it when it shows up. Comment below if you've dealt with HOA tyrants. This revenge is sweet. But let me back up 3 hours. I'd been at the grocery store when my phone exploded with texts from neighbors. Something happening at your house. Tow truck in your driveway. Beverly's out there with her clipboard again. By the time I raced home through Pine Valley Estates, speeding through every yellow light, it was too late. The absence hit me like incoming fire, where my 1969 Camaro SS should have been sitting. The car I'd spent 3 years restoring with parts my father had collected before his heart attack. There was nothing but fresh gouges in the asphalt and black tire marks where the tow truck had scraped her backward across the concrete. I sat in my pickup for a full minute, groceries forgotten, staring at that violated space. The neighborhood felt wrong. Mrs. Morgan's kids usually played kickball until dinner, but today the cul-de-sac sat empty except for the vultures watching from behind their curtains. The silence stretched like a held breath before a mortar impact. That's when I heard Tom Bradley whisper to his wife on their front porch. He used to drive tanks or something over in Afghanistan. His voice carried just enough for me to catch. A reminder that some neighbors actually remembered what I'd done before Iron Horse Logistics became my civilian life. Beverly Walsh emerged from her house like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. At 52, Beverly had transformed our quiet neighborhood into her personal kingdom. Real estate had tanked her husband's business 2 years ago, leaving them scrambling financially, but she'd found new power in micromanaging everyone else's property values. That clipboard never left her side. A portable throne from which she issued daily judgments about grass height, mailbox angles, and who deserved to live here. "I warned you about that eyesore," she called across the street, voice dripping with satisfaction. "This is a respectable neighborhood, Marcus. We maintain standards." I climbed out slowly, military training keeping my expression neutral even as fury built in my chest. "Where's my car, Beverly?" She consulted her clipboard with theatrical precision. "Towed at 1400 hours for violation of HOA Regulation 7.3. Her smile could have cut glass. 6 documented warnings, all completely legal. My Bronze Star license plate frame lay in my garbage bin, coffee grounds stuck to metal that had survived Taliban mortars. 22 years of service reduced to trash. Something cold and dangerous settled behind my ribs. That car was legally parked on my own property. "Your property ends at the sidewalk." Beverly stepped closer, sensing weakness she could exploit. "That vehicle was destroying our community aesthetic, just like that inappropriate flag display and those oversized military decorations." She gestured at my house with disgust. "Constant reminders that you think service makes you special." The neighborhood went completely silent. Even the birds stopped chirping. Beverly pressed her advantage, voice dropping to make this personal. "Military people always think rules don't apply to them, but this isn't some foreign battlefield where you can do whatever you want. This is my neighborhood, and you'll follow my rules." In Iraq, I'd learned to read enemy positions before engaging. Beverly had just revealed everything: her contempt, her power, and most importantly, her complete ignorance about who she was dealing with. I glanced toward my closed garage, where something weighing 25 tons waited in climate-controlled storage. Beverly followed my gaze but saw only another potential violation. She had no idea what really lived behind that steel door, or why a former tank battalion commander might keep certain pieces of military history for special occasions. "I've been tracking your violations for months," she continued, emboldened by my silence. "Grass height, garbage bin positioning, flag size regulations. Daily fines start tomorrow, $200 until you achieve full compliance." She turned to leave, then delivered her final insult. "Next time you want to play soldier, do it somewhere that appreciates military theatrics. Real Americans don't need to advertise their service." The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. real Americans. I'd pulled wounded soldiers from burning vehicles while mortars fell around us, earned my Bronze Star leading men through hell, and this woman questioned my patriotism over a HOA violation. Beverly strutted back to her house, clipboard tucked under her arm like a trophy. Tom Bradley caught my eye and gave a small nod before disappearing inside. Acknowledgement from someone who understood what those 22 years actually meant. I retrieved my Bronze Star frame from the garbage, brushing off debris. The metal felt solid and familiar, a reminder of battles won through patience, planning, and overwhelming force applied at exactly the right moment. The Camaro had been about the past, memories of working with my father, restoring something beautiful together. But what waited in my garage represented something different entirely. 25 tons of American steel that no HOA regulation had ever contemplated, fully legal and registered as a historical military vehicle. Beverly Walsh thought she'd won today's battle by having my car towed. What she'd actually done was declare war on someone who understood strategy, patience, and the devastating effectiveness of superior firepower deployed at the perfect moment. She didn't know it yet, but she'd just picked a fight with someone who'd won much bigger battles than this. The war began at 6:37 the next morning. I was drinking coffee on my front porch, watching the sunrise paint Pine Valley Estates in shades of gold, when my phone buzzed with the first casualty report. A screenshot from our neighborhood social media group, posted by Beverly at 6:15 a.m. sharp. Urgent. Problem resident continues refusing HOA compliance despite multiple warnings. This affects all our property values. Community action may be necessary. The post already had 12 reactions, mostly angry faces and concerned comments from people who'd probably never exchanged more than a wave with me. Beverly had turned my car situation into a neighborhood crisis overnight, painting herself as the defender of property values against my alleged rebellion. I screenshot everything. 22 years in the military had taught me the value of documentation, and Beverly was about to learn that lesson the hard way. By 8 a.m., she'd escalated beyond social media warfare. I found the first citation taped to my mailbox. Violation notice. Grass height exceeds community standard by 1 1/4 inches. Daily fine. $200 until corrected. I measured my lawn with a ruler. 23 inches exactly. Well within the HOA bylaws that specified grass maintained between 2 and 4 inches in height. Beverly was making up violations. The second citation appeared on my garbage bins. Improper waste container positioning. Bins must be placed exactly 18 inches from curb, parallel to street. I measured again. 17 3/4 inches, perfectly parallel. Another fabricated violation, with photographic evidence proving my compliance. 5 more citations appeared throughout the day. Mailbox angle, doormat placement, garden hose positioning, even the direction my outdoor chairs faced. Beverly was manufacturing violations faster than I could document them, each carrying the same $200 daily fine threat. Her desperation had created a systematic harassment campaign that would have been impressive if it weren't so obviously illegal. The community response split exactly as expected. Tom Bradley nodded supportively when he saw me photographing citations, while newer families like the Johnsons avoided eye contact entirely. Mrs. Morgan brought me homemade cookies with a quiet, "Stay strong, mijo," that told me where veteran families stood. But the young professionals worried about property values, and Beverly's social media campaign was working on their fears. Time to research my enemy. The Pine Valley Estates HOA bylaws made fascinating reading when you understood military intelligence gathering. Section 12 clearly outlined enforcement procedures, written warnings with specific violation descriptions, mandatory 30-day response periods, board review before any financial penalties. Beverly had violated every procedural requirement when she had my car towed, creating a paper trail of misconduct that invalidated her entire authority. But the real intelligence goldmine came from public records. County clerk files showed that Beverly's husband, Robert, had lost his real estate license 18 months ago, after multiple client complaints about misrepresented property conditions and undisclosed defects. Their house carried a second mortgage, taken out 8 months ago for $67,000. Financial pressure that explained Beverly's desperate obsession with property values and her need to demonstrate control. Most damaging of all, HOA meeting minutes archived on our community website revealed that 3 months ago, Beverly had unilaterally approved a $5,000 landscaping contract for her brother-in-law's company without competitive bidding or board approval, directly violating the same financial oversight requirements she now claimed to enforce so religiously against residents. Beverly Walsh was running a corrupt, procedurally violative HOA operation while fabricating violations against residents who challenged her authority. In military terms, she was operating outside her own rules of engagement while demanding strict adherence from everyone else. That afternoon, she made her next tactical error. I was checking my mail when Beverly approached from across the street, clipboard in hand and fire in her eyes. The confrontation felt inevitable, like enemy contact you could sense coming long before visual confirmation. "You think being a veteran makes you untouchable?" she snapped, positioning herself between me and my front door like she owned the sidewalk. "I've dealt with your type before. Military people who think they can ignore civilian authority." The entire community was watching now. Tom Bradley stood on his lawn, pretending to water plants while obviously listening. Mrs. Morgan had emerged to collect mail she'd already retrieved that morning. The Johnson family peered through their living room curtains. Beverly's decision to make this confrontation public had just raised the stakes from private harassment to neighborhood spectacle, and she was too angry to realize the tactical disadvantage. "What type is that, Beverly?" I asked quietly, keeping my voice level and reasonable for the audience. "Entitled, arrogant, acting like rules don't apply because you wore a uniform." She stepped closer, trying to use physical intimidation in full view of witnesses. "This is civilian territory, Marcus. Your military rank means absolutely nothing here. I make the rules, and you're going to follow them or face the consequences." The irony was perfect. Beverly was lecturing me about following rules while violating every procedural requirement in her own HOA bylaws. But her public display had just fundamentally shifted the entire dynamic. This was no longer about citations or car towing or even harassment. This was about who controlled Pine Valley Estates, and she just declared total war in front of half the neighborhood. "I'm familiar with following rules," I said calmly. "The question is whether you are." Her face flushed deep red. "I am the rules in this neighborhood. Every citation, every fine, every enforcement decision goes through me, and you're going to learn that the hard way, starting tomorrow when your fines double for non-compliance." She turned and stomped back to her house, leaving me with absolute clarity about my next strategic move. Beverly had just escalated beyond harassment into something that resembled a hostile takeover attempt, complete with threats of financial punishment for resistance. That evening, I compiled my counter-offensive research. Federal housing protections existed for veterans facing discrimination based on military status, and Beverly's public comments about my service created a clear documented pattern of bias. Her procedural violations during my car towing provided grounds for challenging her authority through proper channels. Her financial misconduct gave the HOA board legal cause to remove her from office entirely. But defensive measures wouldn't end this war. I needed superior firepower, legally speaking. My research into military vehicle regulations had revealed something Beverly's narrow civilian worldview couldn't possibly anticipate. The Department of Defense surplus program allowed qualified veterans to purchase decommissioned military vehicles for historical preservation purposes. With proper federal licensing, insurance, and registration, these vehicles became legal civilian property, subject to federal rather than local regulations. My garage currently housed exactly such a vehicle, a 1960 M60 Patton tank, fully decommissioned and registered as historical military equipment. 25 tons of American steel that I'd acquired 3 years ago for veteran memorial events and educational demonstrations. Beverly's HOA bylaws meticulously regulated passenger vehicles, trucks, motorcycles, and recreational vehicles. They said absolutely nothing about historical military equipment, because suburban developers never imagined needing such provisions. I had found the perfect legal weapon to end Beverly's tyrannical reign while staying completely within federal law. If she wanted to play by rules, I was about to teach her what real rules looked like. The real war began in my home office at 0500 hours the next morning. While Beverly slept off her belief that she'd won last night's confrontation, I was already building the intelligence file that would end her reign of suburban tyranny. Federal military surplus regulations proved fascinating reading. Qualified veterans could purchase decommissioned equipment for historical preservation and memorial activities, with federal law superseding local ordinances for such vehicles. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake Morrison, my former platoon sergeant who now ran a military surplus dealership in Nevada. "Marcus, that M60 you've been storing is ready for transport whenever you need it. All federal permits current, insurance paid through next year. Just say when." The M60 patent tank, sitting in climate-controlled storage 300 miles away, wasn't just a vehicle, it was a memorial. I'd purchased it 3 years ago, after attending too many funerals for brothers who didn't make it home. The tank bore the same designation as the one I'd commanded in Iraq, where Sergeant Danny Morgan, Mrs. Morgan's nephew, had died pulling wounded soldiers from a burning Bradley. 25 tons of American steel that represented every fallen comrade Beverly Walsh had just insulted when she questioned my patriotism. By 0700, Beverly launched her counterattack. The noise complaint arrived via certified mail. Excessive commercial vehicle activity disturbing residential peace. Iron Horse Logistics operates illegally from residential address. Complete fabrication. I ran a consulting business from my home office with zero vehicle traffic. But Beverly had found neighbors willing to sign affidavits supporting her claims. The Johnsons had signed, probably terrified of Beverly's retaliation. So had the new couple on Maple Street, who knew nothing about the actual situation. Fear was Beverly's most effective weapon, the threat of harassment that made good people choose compliance over justice. Her next move revealed true desperation. Legal notice. Property lien filing for accumulated HOA violations totaling $4,600. Payment required within 30 days or foreclosure proceedings will commence. She was threatening to steal my house over fabricated citations, using intimidation tactics that had no legal foundation but might scare someone who didn't understand the system. That's when I decided to go nuclear. The HOA board meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. in the community center, a monthly gathering that usually attracted 5 residents and lasted 20 minutes. Tonight would be different. I spent the afternoon preparing a presentation that would expose Beverly's misconduct in front of witnesses and create an official record of her violations. The community center buzzed with unusual energy when I arrived. Word had spread about the conflict, and nearly 30 residents filled chairs that usually sat empty. Beverly presided from the head table like a queen holding court, clipboard positioned for maximum authority display. "First order of business," she announced with theatrical formality, addressing the ongoing compliance issues with property at 1522 Pine Valley Drive. "Actually," I interrupted, standing with a manila folder thick with evidence, "I'd like to present information about procedural violations that invalidate those compliance actions." The room went silent. Beverly's face flushed red, but she couldn't refuse without looking tyrannical in front of the entire community. I quickly summarized the HOA bylaw violations. No warnings issued, no response periods provided, no board approval for enforcement actions. Then I moved to the real ammunition. There's also unauthorized financial decisions requiring investigation. I distributed meeting minutes from 3 months ago. A $5,000 landscaping contract, approved without competitive bidding or board vote, paid to a company owned by Beverly's brother-in-law. Board member Patricia Wells studied the documents with growing alarm. "Beverly, this shows you signed this contract unilaterally." "It was an emergency repair," Beverly stammered. "For decorative landscaping?" I asked. "The invoices show ornamental plants and aesthetic improvements, not emergency repairs." The board looked stunned.